Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining the conversation today. With Alana's schedule and my schedule being so crazy right now, we've had a hard time catching up together. So we've been doing some individual episodes. And I wanted to do a quick episode today around some red flags that you as a betrayed partner can be watching for and looking for. I've had this come up a lot with some clients who are navigating the healing journey when there hasn't quite been enough of that consistency over time. And so we're in that stage where we are still questioning and wondering, can I trust? Can I not trust? Is this real? Is this not real? I know that's a really common space to be in when we're still trying to maybe find professional care. Maybe you have found your person, but you're waiting for your partner to find their professional to work with. A lot of people are finding it hard to get in with professionals right now. I know that's a reality. And I know that is a frustrating reality that it might take time to get some footing, some consistency around getting that professional help. Where, again, like I said, maybe you've been getting help and now your partner who did the betraying is starting to get the ball rolling on their end and get some help. And sometimes it takes time working out schedules. Like I get it. There's some logistics that go along with this. However, that period of waiting for that consistency on their end to happen, I just want to validate the frustration, the agony that can come with that. What I also see is that betraying partners will be getting help. And yet there's still this period of time where some red flags are happening and betrayed partners aren't quite sure what those red flags are, or they are missing them, or parts of them are denying, rationalizing, and minimizing the reality of those red flags. So I thought I would just mention a few of the most common ones that I see so that you can be aware of what that might look like. Notice if this is something that's resonating with you. This isn't an entire list. This isn't an all-encompassing list of red flags. Like I said, they are some of the more common ones that I noticed oftentimes gets missed, or we just don't recognize or realize that it could be a red flag. The first one is when the betraying partner expects the one they injured to have blind trust, to have that kind of trust that you as the betrayed partner had in the beginning of the relationship, when your reality as the betrayed partner was being altered. Now that maybe there was a discovery, a disclosure, there oftentimes is this expectation of just, why can't you trust me again? Or on the flip side, I've also seen a lot of my betrayed partners wonder why they can't just trust again. Almost like we're looking for, and I totally remember doing this, looking for that same level of, again, blind trust, which, first of all, when I say blind trust, it's this assumption of complete trust in someone without evidence, accountability, or boundaries. And so, in all honesty, this kind of, quote, blind trust never really should have existed to begin with, because that just means we had a lack of boundaries. Someone in the relationship had a lack of accountability. Healthy relationships are built on earned trust, not blind trust. That earned trust happens in stages throughout the relationship where there's consistency, there's transparency, there's emotional attunement, there's accountability. There's these levels of openness that's normal. Trust should never be blind. And I will say, I'll say this from my own experience. I think a lot of this was cultural. If your partner meets certain social requirements, maybe religious requirements, then they should just be trusted. And again, in my own experience, and a lot of the people that I work with rushed into a relationship. They got into a relationship at a very early age. So these levels of trust didn't really have enough time to be established or built, because so many got into a relationship at such an early age or didn't really date long. But trust should never be blind, meaning it should never be given freely without discernment and boundaries. When we go into a relationship with that blind trust, it's usually because we've had attachment wounds, we have people-pleasing tendencies, we have romantic idealism, meaning this idea that if love is real, then we shouldn't need to question each other, right? That myth, oh my gosh, myth. And then just a lack of past betrayal. I mean, if you've never experienced deception, then it's easy to assume and operate under this idea that we're all living in this same idea of integrity. When we go into a relationship with blind trust, or we're expected to blindly trust, then we overlook the red flags. We stay in unhealthy relationships way longer than necessary. We feel very responsible for the other person's choices. There's just a lot of wishful thinking or hopeful assumptions that are associated with blind trust. So the reality is, not only does blind trust need to go bye-bye in a relationship, especially after betrayal, trust must be understood by both people, that trust is earned through consistent honesty, transparency, accountability, and follow through over time. If you are expecting yourself to trust blindly, or your partner is expecting, this is a red flag. The second red flag that I see oftentimes is blaming the betrayed partner. So the one that caused the injury is blaming the betrayed partner. This is where the betrayer shifts responsibility onto the betrayed. And there's this subtle, if not covert, implication that their actions are what caused the lack of attention, lack of intimacy, nagging, or any other excuse that will come up with. The reality is, the betrayer's choices were theirs alone. You, as the betrayed partner, did not cause it. You are not responsible for their behavior. So if you're feeling guilty, if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling responsible for your partner's choice to betray, this is a red flag. It can come across so subtly. I don't want to get totally into a whole episode. I could do a whole episode on this, but just a couple things that I notice that can be really subtle in how this might show up. So it can be, if you had met my needs, then this would have never happened. This feeling that I was so unloved and so disconnected, and that's why I turned to porn, or that's why I turned to this other person. Because the reality is, the betrayed partner is responsible for managing their emotions and behaviors. And so it was their choices alone. Maybe it comes across as, well, you weren't paying enough attention, or you're always so angry or hurt or sad. That's why we can't move forward. I have heard blaming phrases like, at least I told you the truth. Can't you give me some credit? Like, I could have kept lying, but I told you. That should count for something. Honesty is not an act of generosity. It's the bare minimum required for rebuilding trust. And so this is a manipulation tactic. I see it as to seek praise for something that should have been present all along, which is truth and honesty. This can come out as blaming as, well, you're the one that has trust issues. It's your insecurities that are ruining our progress. You're making it all about you. You haven't been perfect either. You're not making me feel like a good person. Okay, these are some very subtle but very real ways that I have seen betrayers blame their partners, and that is a red flag. Number 3 red flag is there's no honesty about themselves. The betrayer is going to hide details, minimize the truth, tell half-truths, or only admit things when caught. This is not someone that is ready for change or truth. The reality is, honesty is foundational to healing. If they are still hiding things, then they are still in active deception. They are still actively trying to mess with your reality. We cannot heal. We cannot move forward or progress if we are not living in reality. So if they cannot be honest with themselves and they are not honest with you, this is a red flag. Number 4 is gaslighting. I think it's a given. If you have not checked out Sarah Morales's gaslighting program, please, please, please go check it out, sarahmorales.com. I will put a link in the show notes. Become a gaslighting expert, y'all. Become a gaslighting expert. Know what this looks like, because it's really twisty. It's really shady. It can be confusing, but you've got to be able to learn what this form of manipulation looks like in your specific relationship, because it is a red flag. If they are still doing it, it means they are not in recovery. Number 5, the words and actions don't align. They say that they're changing. They say that they're sorry. They say that they're doing all the things, but their actions are not reflecting it. There is no deep emotional work. There's no change in how they attach to you, and there is no internal shifts because the reality is real change. It is observable, it's measurable, and it's consistent over time, not just these empty promises. This is one of the reasons why I love helping my clients connect to their body and trust their body, trust their intuition again, because I see this one really get in the way of a lot of my betrayed partners where they want so badly for their partner to change. They want to believe that their partner is changing because who doesn't? Who doesn't want all of this hell to go away, right? So when you see your partner checking off the list and them saying, well, my therapist says I'm doing really well, or I'm really changing, but you're not feeling any safer, or you're not feeling any different in their presence, where you're still feeling very confused, where you're still feeling a lot of these other red flags that I'm talking about, where you're feeling guilt, you're feeling blamed, you're noticing gaslighting, then most likely their feet are not lining up with their mouth, which leads to the next one. It's a red flag when you don't see any emotional change. So again, they're checking off the tasks, they're going to therapy, reading the books, joining the groups, but they still lack true emotional attunement and empathy for the pain that they've caused. They're still not becoming aware or able to sit with their own emotions because this isn't about checking off the boxes. It's about being emotionally present and accountable. And I will just validate that in the early stages of recovery, most betrayers are struggling with emotional immaturity, right? Which makes deep emotional change very difficult. And so they will be defensive, avoidant, overwhelmed by that shame. However, as they really do engage in the work, those emotional shifts happen in stages. They move from defensiveness to humility. So it might look clunky for a hot minute, but they're able to self-correct and come back in humility. So they might deflect, minimize, and justify their action. But if they're growing, if you're noticing emotional growth, they're going to accept responsibility without excuse. They're going to listen without getting defensive. They're going to recognize that trust isn't built through words, but with those actions. Early in recovery, they might struggle with self-pity and shame. We're watching to see if they go to healthy remorse. So rather than collapsing into the shame spiral and making the conversations about their own pain instead of the pain that they caused, true emotional change and shift is going to be, they're going to feel that true remorse without making it about themselves. They're going to accept that feeling uncomfortable in themselves, with themselves, is necessary for healing. They're going to focus on repairing the harm rather than seeking the reassurance from you. We're looking for them to go from avoidance to emotional engagement rather than avoiding the difficult emotions, rather than withdrawing when the conversation gets difficult, or where they try to rush past a conversation about betrayal. Like, talking about this only makes things worse, or why can't we just move on? What we're looking for in emotional healing and change and emotional growth is that they stay present in those difficult conversations, especially when it gets hard. They're able to sit with the discomfort rather than escape it. And they're able to go into more of that deep self-reflection instead of avoiding it. You're going to get, rather than getting surface level apologies, you're going to get deep empathy. Rather than self-focused, they're going to be partner focused. Okay. So those are what we're looking for when I say there's no emotional change. If you don't have any of those shifts or changes that I just mentioned, it's a red flag. Okay. Number 7, you have to do more to keep the peace. If you are doing more in that relationship to keep the peace, this is a red flag. If you are overfunctioning, managing their emotions, and working harder than they are to fix things, this is a red flag. Because the reality is, if you feel responsible for their healing or take responsibility for their healing, their emotions, their work, their behavior, the cycle of betrayal and harm is still in place. We have to be able to look at the reality of that. So if you feel like you're doing more in that relationship to keep the boat from rocking, this is a red flag. It's okay to rock the boat. You don't have to jump out of the boat to rock it. Anchor in and start rocking. We have to see what the relationship is really, truly made of. The next one is expecting forgiveness and reconciliation on their timeline. This is a red flag. If they get frustrated because you're still processing and ask, haven't we moved past this? Or they expect forgiveness before trust is rebuilt, this is a red flag. Forgiveness is not the same as trust. I know you've heard Alana and I talk about this so much. It is so worth repeating over and over. Forgiveness is not the same as trust. Healing takes time, and the betrayed partner has a right to move at their own pace, not the one who did the injury. So if you are being expected to forgive and reconcile because they think you should, or because they think that you're taking too long, this is a red flag. The next one is defensive when you ask questions. If they're still getting angry, dismissive, or shut down when you're trying to seek clarity about your reality, about the reality that they messed with, about the reality that is still fragmented for you, this is a red flag, because you absolutely deserve true accountability, which means answering the hard questions with honesty and patience. If there's defensiveness, then they may not be ready for truth change, or they're still hiding or avoiding responsibility. This goes a lot into full disclosure. So depending on where you're at in your journey, if you have not yet had a full therapeutic disclosure, please go back and listen to those episodes that Luke, Alana, and I did around full disclosure. This is really, really important. If there's constant defensiveness on asking questions and you're still really, truly trying to seek reality, there's going to be a lot of red flags going on right now. I really want to encourage those of you who have not had a full therapeutic disclosure, or one that is done properly, might I add, one that's done in a way that really supports the betrayed partner and goes through the process, then please go back and listen to those episodes. I think it'd be really, really helpful, and dive in a little bit more around what I'm talking about here in terms of defensiveness when you ask questions. Because disclosure isn't a one and done. A full therapeutic disclosure is the beginning of the truth and honesty part of the relationship. It doesn't just come out in one sitting and then we never visit it again. So if you have had a full therapeutic disclosure and you are still asking questions, trying to get clarity, and you're being dismissed, shut down, or your partner's getting angry, then this is a red flag. Another red flag is if they're only committed if you stay. If their motivation to change is dependent on whether or not you're still in the relationship, this is a red flag. If you mention separation and they spiral, but if you stay, they slack off, this is a red flag. The reality is real change is internal, and they must want to and need to grow for themselves, not just to keep the relationship intact. This goes for both partner, betrayed, and betrayer. Being really clear about what our motivation is to stay in the relationship is really important. But if you're feeling pressure as a betrayed partner to stay in the relationship so that they get help or so that they get better, I really want to encourage you to meet with a professional and work through some of this stickiness, because ultimately, this isn't going to be a sustainable way to approach recovery. Another red flag is no accountability from outside support. So if your partner who did the betraying is resisting accountability partners, therapists, support groups, or only seeking advice from people who will tell them what they want to hear, this is a red flag. True accountability means being open to that external feedback and correction. And so if they're isolating, then they're not really fully invested in the healing process. This can be a really hard reality check for so many betrayed partners who are watching their partner, begging their partner to go get help. And many of you are finding out very painfully that you can't make your partner get help. And even if your partner is getting help, you can't make them actually be honest with their therapist or their professional. This part of the journey is so individual. And I just have so much empathy for those of you who are watching your partner resist any outside help or support right now, yet they're telling you they're fine or they're seemingly not acting out. The truth is it's a red flag. In the years that I have done this, I've yet to see the unicorn where they get caught or they get discovered of their acting out behaviors and they magically never do it again. The last one that I'll mention today as a red flag is no boundaries with temptations, meaning they resist blocking certain people. They resist staying off inappropriate sites. They resist putting up safeguards or put safeguards in place because they think that they don't need them. If the one who betrayed is not creating boundaries for the ways that they are tempted to act out again, this is a red flag. Protecting recovery is a choice. And if they're unwilling to set firm boundaries for themselves, then they're not fully committed to change. If this is something that you're recognizing in your partner, then it is a red flag. The bottom line for you as the betrayed partner is that if parts of you are minimizing, rationalizing, or dismissing any of these red flags, then it makes sense why you might be stuck in a toxic cycle rather than actually healing. Because change requires honesty, full truth, no hiding, transparency, open phone, open access, no defensiveness, empathy, not just guilt, but true emotional connection, consistent behavioral change, not just words, but actions that hold over time, and personal growth, healing for yourself, not just to keep the relationship. Until these changes happen, real trust cannot be built. And I just want all of you betrayed partners to know that you're allowed to outgrow a version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserved. Your healing is not dependent on their change, and your peace is built on what you choose next. Because you're not broken, you are in the process of becoming whole again in ways that you never imagined. It can be so difficult to walk away from the toxic dance that so many of us get sucked into, but healing begins when you stop arguing with that version of them that doesn't exist and start to see the reality of the version that is. And when we ignore the red flags, when we don't look at the reality of how they're showing up, it can be really hard to know what that next right step is. And I'm not saying the next step is divorce. It's what is the next right step? It has to be based in reality. When we're ignoring red flags and we're ignoring the reality of how they're showing up in the relationship or how we're showing up in the relationship, then it makes it really hard to get out of that dance and take that next step forward towards healing, whatever that leads you to. But you don't have to beg someone to see your worth and value. Stand in it. The betrayal was not your fault. The healing, however, is absolutely in your power. You absolutely get to decide what kind of relationship you want and what works for you and what doesn't. So even though I mentioned some of these basic red flags, some of these common things that I see show up a lot, I want to encourage you to keep writing out your own list of red flags. What is okay with you and what isn't okay? What are you noticing that doesn't feel good, that doesn't feel clear, that doesn't feel peaceful, that doesn't feel safe, that doesn't feel relational to you? You get to decide what your relationship looks like. You get to decide what kind of relationship you want to have and who you want to have that relationship with and how that looks. You can know what that looks like when you know yourself, which is why it's so important to do your own work and find a way to ground into your own knowing, your own truth, not only so that you can identify the red flags and see them in real time, but so that you don't get thrown all out of whack if you're spotting them. One of the things I love and I'm so passionate about is helping women get in their bodies, because betrayal trauma disconnects us from our bodies, which is why it's easy to miss the flags, which is why it's easy to minimize and rationalize and justify a lot of these behaviors that are harming us. Your body holds on to so much of the trauma that you've experienced, even if you've tried so hard in your mind to let go of it. Because trauma isn't just a memory, it is stored deep within you. And that true healing means going beyond just talking about it, which is why I am so excited about the up and coming Body Awakened Brain Spotting Intensive. There are a few spots left. I would love to have you join me. It's small, it's intimate, where you will experience deep body-centered healing through brain spotting, powerful somatic exercises, and connection in a supportive community that sees you, that holds space for you, and that can help you reclaim what was taken. This isn't just about healing, it's about transformation. It's about reconnecting to your body and releasing what no longer serves you and stepping more into that empowered, whole version of you. This is what I love helping my clients attain. And doing it in a very intensified way can be really powerful. April 10th through 12th, click the show notes for Brain Spotting Intensive. But it's not just about brain spotting. We're doing so many experiences with the body to connect back to the body. I cannot wait. Come join me. Let's awaken your body and release the trauma and start reclaiming safety and reclaiming you. Take care, everybody.
Hi, my name's Hallie Roderick with Choose Recovery Services. And if you're a woman healing from betrayal trauma and you find yourself feeling stuck or experiencing overwhelming triggers, having a difficult time trusting yourself, or even thinking about trusting others, or having a hard time understanding what healthy boundaries are, how to hold those, I want to invite you to consider joining us at our upcoming Courage to Thrive Intensive, held on April 23rd through 26th in Spanish Fork, Utah. These intensives are one of my favorite things to be a part of because healing happens in community. There's just something different that happens when you're in person with other women who maybe your stories aren't exactly the same, but there's a mutual understanding and a safety that is created by being in a common community. So if this sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, please check the show notes, reach out to our office to get more information, and come see us in Utah on April 23rd through 26th. We'd love to have you join us.